We live in a chaotic world. Wars, crises, uncertainty, personal and social collapse. But is chaos just destruction? Or is it actually an essential part of existence itself? Throughout history, philosophers, artists, and thinkers have wrestled with this mysterious force. Some feared it, others embraced it. In this video, we're going to explore 16 philosophical perspectives that show how chaos is not just noise or disorder. It's also creation, freedom, origin, and even meaning. If you've ever felt like reality is slipping out of your control, this video is for you. Have you ever felt like there's something inside you about to explode? A discomfort, a restlessness, a quiet tension between who you are and who you don't even know you can be yet. Nietzsche would call that inner chaos. But don't get it wrong, that chaos is not a flaw. It's the raw material of transformation. Out of that inner disorder, something sublime can be born, a dancing star. That poetic image, taken from Thus Spoke Zarathustra, isn't just a pretty line. It's a powerful symbol of what Nietzsche believed most deeply. Real creation can only emerge when we let go of the fake safety of imposed order and dive into the fertile chaos of existence. Unlike people who chase stability at any cost, Nietzsche suggests a different path. Accept the chaos, face it, dance with it, because only those who risk walking through the darkness can create light. For Nietzsche, chaos isn't just confusion, mess, or ruin. It's a state before form, a fertile field where the new can be born. He's not talking about a destructive, empty chaos, but about creative chaos, a space where old structures can fall and new values can be invented. In his philosophy, this is directly tied to his critique of traditional Western morality. According to Nietzsche, the values we inherited from Christianity, from European culture, from tradition, are values that deny life. They praise guilt, sacrifice, obedience, fear. He calls them slave values. To create new values, the old ones have to be destroyed. And that process is not calm or safe, it's chaotic. But it's in that chaos that true freedom begins. Nietzsche declared, "God is dead." But he didn't say it with joy. He said it with gravity. God is dead, and we have killed him. That famous phrase isn't just about religion. It's about the collapse of an entire system of meaning. If God dies, then with him die the absolute foundations of morality, truth, and reason as the final measure. And what's left? The void, nothingness, chaos. But Nietzsche doesn't see that as a catastrophe. He sees it as a radical possibility to start over. This is where the dancing star comes in. For something new and bright to be born, we have to cross that dark zone where there are no guarantees anymore. Life stops being a closed system and becomes an open field of creation. And you, who used to just follow ready-made values, are now called to become a creator of yourself. In the heart of Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Nietzsche presents the Übermensch, the overman, or beyond man. But he's not some arrogant superhero or brutal conqueror. The overman is the one who can create meaning out of chaos. He doesn't chase absolute certainties. He doesn't need dogmas or eternal truths. He dances with chaos exactly because he understands that everything is movement, transformation, impermanence. While many try to run away from chaos, hiding in ideologies, traditions, or ready-made truths, the overman walks on the edge of the abyss, steady, because he doesn't fear the void. He knows. Chaos is the ground where the deepest freedom takes root. Nietzsche doesn't invite us to a quiet life. He proposes an intense, tragic, elevated existence, a life where each person becomes the author of their own story. But for that, you have to cultivate what he calls the will to power. This will to power is not about controlling others. It's about mastering yourself. It's the force that turns suffering into growth, that turns inner chaos into art, action, and freedom. It's that inner flame that says, yes, I am contradictory. Yes, I am unstable. But it's exactly because of that I'm human, and that I can reinvent myself. Nietzsche used the image of dancing all the time. Why? Because dancing is the opposite of rigidity. To dance, you have to listen to the rhythm, but also know how to improvise. Dance demands balance and boldness. It demands surrender. And maybe there's no better image to express what he meant by a dancing star. You, as a human being, can become light, not by erasing your chaos, but by turning it into rhythm, into art, into power, into an affirmation of life. Nietzsche, today, what does chaos teach us? In times of crisis, uncertainty, and sudden change, Nietzsche is more relevant than ever. We're surrounded by ready-made speeches about what's right, what success is, how we should live. But how many of those truths still make sense? Nietzsche invites us to a rare kind of courage, to deconstruct, to question, to refuse the automatic, to create. And all of that starts inside. You don't have to pretend you're at peace. You don't have to hide your inner mess. Maybe what you're calling confusion is actually the beginning of something new. Have you ever woken up with that quiet feeling that something is off? As if, all of a sudden, life lost its automatic shine. Like everything around you, work, appointments, goals, feels mechanical, empty, without any real why behind it. That moment of discomfort, no matter how subtle, is your first glimpse of the absurd. Albert Camus, the French-Algerian writer and philosopher, called this the clash between the human desire for meaning and the unreasonable silence of the universe. Human beings look for logic, order, a clear purpose. But the world just is. And that's where existential chaos is born. Not outside, but inside. Camus starts his philosophy of the absurd with one brutal question. In a world with no objective meaning, why keep living? That's the central question in his book, The Myth of Sisyphus, where he writes, "There is only one really serious philosophical problem: suicide." But hold on. This is not a praise of death. It's actually a scream of lucidity. Camus doesn't want us to fall into passive nihilism. He wants us to stare the absurd in the face. No masks, no illusions. So what is the absurd after all? The absurd isn't out there in things. It's in the relationship between us and the world. It's the collision between our thirst for meaning and the silence of the universe. It's like shouting at the sky for answers, and the sky staying quiet. Faced with that, a lot of people run to comforts, religions that promise salvation, ideologies that offer a ready-made purpose, moral systems, dogmas, promises of life after death. Camus turns them all down. He writes, "There is no fate that cannot be surmounted by scorn." This line carries something powerful. Nothing forces us to accept an order that's been handed to us. The real challenge is to live without falling back on a divine, metaphysical, or eternal logic. It's walking through uncertainty without inventing excuses. It's living with chaos without pretending it's not there. Camus finds in the Greek myth of Sisyphus the perfect metaphor for modern human life. Sisyphus was condemned by the gods to push a huge rock up a hill, only to watch it roll back down, over and over for all eternity. The punishment sounds cruel. No purpose, no redemption. But Camus makes a shocking move. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. Happy? Yes, because Sisyphus recognizes the absurd of his condition and still keeps going. He doesn't fight the gods directly. He defies the uselessness of his own task. Camus calls this conscious revolt. The rock that keeps rolling back down is the symbol of repetitive life with no promise of salvation. But by accepting the absurd, Sisyphus refuses despair. He doesn't bow his head, and that's exactly where he becomes free. Camus doesn't want us to accept life as it is in a passive way. The answer he offers is revolt, but don't confuse that with blind, angry rebellion. Revolt for Camus is an ethical, lucid, creative act. It's saying yes to life even knowing it's absurd. I rebel, therefore we exist. often paraphrased as, "I rebel, therefore I exist." This twist on Descartes' "I think, therefore I am," shows how Camus trades absolute reason for the lived experience of confrontation. Revolt is how we protect human dignity in the middle of chaos. It's not resignation. It's not escape. It's a way of being. Staying in the world with no guarantees, but with courage. For Camus, the fact that life doesn't come with a built-in meaning doesn't make it empty. It actually makes it precious. It's because nothing is guaranteed that everything matters. Art, for example, becomes an act of resistance. Love becomes a gesture of generosity. Freedom becomes a daily achievement. Creating beauty in the middle of chaos is a form of revolt. Living fully, even knowing everything is temporary, is an act of defiance against the absurd. Camus believed in an ethics without dogma, but not without values. Solidarity, justice, caring for others, all of this can be affirmed without needing a heaven watching us from above. We can act with compassion not because someone orders us to, but because we choose to. Today, more than ever, the world seems to spin at the pace of the absurd. Global crises, wars, environmental collapse, emotional insecurity, social instability. More and more people feel like they're pushing rocks that always roll back down. And in the middle of all this, extremism and fanaticism grow. People crave easy answers, clean stories, some kind of comforting order. But Camus reminds us, the most noble challenge is not to find easy answers. It's to keep living, with awareness, with beauty, with integrity, even when the world seems meaningless. A lot of people confuse Camus with nihilism, but he's actually the opposite. The nihilist says, nothing makes sense, so nothing matters. Camus says, nothing makes sense, so I'm going to make life matter even more. That's what makes him such a special thinker. He doesn't invite you to give up. He invites you to live more intensely, because time is limited, because life is fragile, because chaos is real, and exactly for that reason, so is beauty. Imagine waking up one day and realizing there's nothing telling you who you are. Nothing is written, nothing is decided, no essence, no destiny, no instruction manual for your life. That feeling can be liberating, but also deeply unsettling. That's exactly where Jean-Paul Sartre, one of the greatest thinkers of the 20th century, comes in. For him, this lack of a preset essence, this absence of a ready-made purpose, is not a mistake. It's the basic condition of being human. Man is condemned to be free. That line hits like thunder. Sartre isn't playing with words. He literally means we have no excuses. We are fully responsible for everything we choose to be. The central idea of Sartrean existentialism is simple and radical. Existence precedes essence. In plain terms, human beings exist first. We're born, we act, we choose, and only later do we build our essence. This flips centuries of Western philosophy upside down. Up until then, people believed each human being had an essence given by God, nature, or reason. But Sartre says, there is no ready-made essence, no unchanging soul, no universal human nature. What exists is a being thrown into the world, with no justification, no map, tossed into the chaos of freedom. But what does it mean to be free in this sense? It means nothing is written. You're not a character following a script. You write your story as you live it. Every choice you make shapes who you are. And more than that, you don't choose only for yourself. In choosing, you're affirming values that could, in theory, apply to all human beings. Freedom, then, is not a light gift. It's a burden. That's why Sartre says we are condemned to be free, because we can't escape it. Even not acting is already a choice. And this inescapable freedom throws the human being into the void. This extreme freedom doesn't bring peace. It brings anguish. And this anguish is not just an emotional breakdown. It's a philosophical symptom. It comes from realizing that you are the only one responsible for your life. The moment man realizes that he is abandoned, that it is he who must decide what he will be, then anguish is born. Anguish isn't fear of something specific. It's fear of your own freedom. It's what we feel when we realize there is no higher authority telling us what to do. No God, no essence, no excuse. There's only us and our choices. But not everyone accepts that weight clearly and honestly. Sartre calls bad faith the behavior of those who try to run away from that freedom. It's when we pretend we don't have a choice. When we say, I'm like this because society made me this way, or I have to follow the rules because it's always been like this, or we hide behind fixed roles, father, mother, professional, citizen, as if that totally defined who we are. Bad faith is a kind of lie, a lie we tell ourselves. It's more comfortable to live as if life were already decided, as if we were just cogs in a machine. But that comfort has a price, giving up our authenticity. Sartre also looked deeply at human relationships. In his play No Exit, he wrote one of his most famous lines: "Hell is other people." But careful. That doesn't mean other people are evil or unbearable. It means that the presence of others shows parts of ourselves that we don't control. When someone looks at me, I become an object in their eyes. And it's in that mirror that I often get lost. So freedom is not something we live alone. It's also a field of conflict, where we're constantly negotiating who we are in front of other people's gaze. But even there, even in the face of other people's judgment, the final choice is mine. Others can label me, interpret me, limit me, but I decide whether I accept that role or not. If you feel tempted to say, "But I didn't choose to be born," Sartre would answer, "You didn't choose to be born, but you choose at every moment what you do with the fact that you're here." And that's radical, because it means we have no excuses. Every gesture, every silence, every relationship, everything expresses a choice. Even not choosing is already a choice. That awareness is heavy, yes, but it's also freeing, because once you understand this, you stop being just a victim of the world and start becoming the author of your own story. For Sartre, the human being is a project, not a fixed project, but a becoming. You are always under construction. That means you're never done. You don't simply are, you are being. And you can change, always. You can give new meaning to your life, drop an identity that no longer fits you, start over from scratch. But that takes courage, it takes responsibility, and above all, it takes authenticity. In a world where everything feels unstable, jobs, relationships, truths, Sartre's thinking can sound scary or revealing. A lot of people today feel adrift, like they've lost the map. But maybe that's exactly when existentialist philosophy becomes urgent. Sartre tells us, yes, we're alone in the universe. Yes, there is no manual. But that's not the end. That's the beginning. Freedom isn't in what the world gives you. It's in how you show up in front of it. Even in the middle of chaos, you can still choose. In the end, Sartre leaves us with a message that's uncomfortable, but also empowering. Man is the being who must be what he is. In other words, no one is going to write your story for you. No one can tell you who you are. Freedom is your burden, but it's also your privilege. In the end, the chaos of existence is not an obstacle to freedom. It's its very condition. You're not defined by a destiny. You're defined by the choices you make day after day. Heraclitus didn't see the world as something that stays put. He saw it as something burning in constant transformation. For him, the universe never rests. It burns, flows, breaks apart, and rebuilds itself at every moment. What we call reality is, in truth, a process that is always slipping away from itself. Nothing stays the same. Stone wears down, flesh ages, thoughts change shape. The river runs without end, and even when it looks the same, it never repeats its own water. Neither the river nor the person stepping into it are ever the same. Heraclitus didn't bring comfort, he brought clarity. Where others looked for stability, he exposed chaos, not as catastrophe, but as the unavoidable condition of existence. Heraclitus lived between the 6th and 5th centuries BC in the Greek city of Ephesus. He was a solitary thinker, often called the obscure, not just because of his fragmented style of writing, but because of how dense his ideas were. His thinking doesn't give you a safe place to hide. He doesn't teach you how to fit into the world. He shows that the world is never the same to begin with. The phrase pantare, everything flows, is not just a physical observation. It's a worldview. It's a philosophy of change. Heraclitus confronts us with the truth that being is becoming. There is no fixed self. There is no static reality. Everything that exists is in motion. And that motion, that constant dance between birth and death, order and disorder, is what makes reality alive. Heraclitus didn't fear chaos. For him, chaos is not the absence of logic. It's a kind of logic we haven't learned to accept yet. He wrote, "The hidden harmony is stronger than the visible. Conflict is the father of all things." For Heraclitus, what we call order is not the opposite of chaos. It's the result of it. Reality is made of tensions, of opposing forces locked in struggle. Day and night, life and death, cold and heat. These pairs don't cancel each other out. They feed each other. This tension, this friction between opposites, is the basic rhythm of the world. It's what makes it pulse. That's a very different view from philosophers before him, like Parmenides, who believed that being was one, unmoving, eternal. Heraclitus breaks with that. Being doesn't simply is, being is becoming. Heraclitus chose fire as the main symbol of reality, not by accident. Fire is pure transformation. It consumes, warms, destroys, purifies. It never keeps the same shape. It is movement made visible. It is chaos in physical form. For Heraclitus, everything behaves like fire. Things exist for a moment and fall apart in the next. Permanence is an illusion. What truly exists is a constant flow, an endless renewal. This kind of thought is hard to swallow. We are beings who crave security, roots, stability. We want eternal love, the perfect job, a fixed identity. But Heraclitus confronts us. That search goes against the fabric of reality itself. Nothing is fixed, not even you. The you of today is not the same as yesterday. Your body changes, your beliefs change, your desires too. Life is a river, and trying to freeze it is like trying to freeze time. For many people, that sounds depressing, but for Heraclitus, it's freeing. True wisdom, according to Heraclitus, is learning to dance with impermanence. It's not fighting the flow, but moving with it consciously. That attitude demands letting go. It demands openness to the unexpected. And it demands the courage to admit that the ground under our feet is never really solid. He wrote, "The road up and the road down are one and the same." With that, he shows that opposites blend into each other. The world is not split into order on one side and disorder on the other. It's built from their dynamic interweaving. In our time, where everything changes all the time, technology, relationships, social values, Heraclitus's thought is more relevant than ever. We live surrounded by constant change and at the same time full of anxiety because we can't control everything. But maybe the problem is the expectation itself. We were never meant to control the flow. We were meant to live inside it. Heraclitus teaches us that stability is a useful fiction, but it's not the truth. And the more we try to keep everything fixed, the more we suffer. This vision also changes how we see ourselves. If everything flows, including being itself, then you are not a fixed identity. You are a process. You don't just a something, You are becoming. That means you can change. You can rebuild yourself. You can drop old versions of yourself without guilt. You can start over. And that is deeply liberating. Because where there is no total fixity, there is room for creation. Heraclitus doesn't give us ready-made answers. He gives us images, fragments. But each fragment is like a spark. It lights up the idea that the world doesn't have to be controlled to be understood. Chaos, for him, is not the lack of meaning. It's the natural way that being shows up. Wisdom is not about resisting it, but about recognizing its rhythm. The harmony of the universe is not neat and predictable, it's intensely alive. Heraclitus is probably the most poetic of the pre-Socratic philosophers. But his poetry doesn't soothe, it burns. He invites us to see reality not as something that needs to be tamed, but as a river that asks for surrender. Those who try to swim against it drown. Those who move with it discover what it means to live with real clarity. Before anything else, there was chaos. Not chaos as disorder, but chaos as origin. A creative void, a vastness without shape, without limits, without name. A state that comes before structured existence. This is the image archaic Greece imagined for the beginning of all things. Long before logic, geometry, the Olympian gods or cosmic order, there was only this formless presence, this energy without outline, this space where everything was still possible. In Hesiod's Theogony, one of the oldest records of Greek mythology, there is no creation out of nothing. There is creation out of chaos. And that idea has deep philosophical implications. The universe wasn't born from order, it was born from the abyss. When Hesiod writes, around the 8th century BC, he isn't trying to do science, he's passing on mythical wisdom. But his verses carry concepts that still echo today. He starts like this. First of all, chaos came to be. The Greek word he uses, chaos, doesn't have the modern sense of mess or disorder. It comes from a root that means opening, gap, chasm. Chaos isn't wild confusion. It's a primordial space, a fertile gap, a nothing full of potential. It's important to get this. Chaos is not a mistake to be fixed. It's the necessary condition for anything to exist. Out of it arise Gaia, earth, Tartarus, the deep abyss, Eros, desire, Erebus, darkness, and Nyx, night. Not by construction, but by spontaneous generation. It's as if chaos simply offers itself to creation, without resistance, without form, but full of force. After chaos comes Gaia, earth, a solid, fertile presence that gives structure to existence. Then Uranus, the sky, and little by little, what the Greeks called cosmos is born. Cosmos in Greek means order, but also beauty, harmony, arrangement. It's the complementary opposite of chaos. It doesn't deny chaos, it emerges from it. This mythical sequence reveals something essential. Order is not the starting point, it's the result. It's like a flower that can only grow if there is soil, and in this case, the soil is chaos. Greek mythic thought, therefore, gives us a subtle and powerful vision. Reality begins in what's undefined, in the dark, in what doesn't have a name yet. And it's exactly from this ontological vulnerability that everything comes into being. The strength of this myth isn't just in its literary value. It lies in the deep philosophical idea that the origin of everything is not order, but undetermined potential. Chaos is the non-being that contains all the possibilities of being. It isn't absence, it's raw fullness. It doesn't limit, it makes possible. While cosmos represents what already is, what already has form, what's already defined, chaos represents what could be. This thought is radical because it challenges our human need for control. We spend our lives chasing stability, structures, guarantees, but the ancient myths tell us, true creativity is born out of our encounter with what can't be tamed. For centuries, Western tradition started to value only cosmos, Reason, clarity, method, control. Chaos was demonized, tied to ignorance, madness, error. But the ancient Greeks saw it more subtly. They knew there is no form without a background. There's no building without ground. There is no creation without chaos. This echoes in art, philosophy, psychology. How many great ideas, revolutions, or works have been born out of moments of crisis, collapse, or inner disorder? Heraclitus said, "Conflict is the father of all things." Nietzsche said, "One must still have chaos in oneself to give birth to a dancing star." But long before them, Hesiod was already teaching, in sacred verse, that the most beautiful order only sprouts from the primordial void. If we look closely at the sequence of beings that emerge from chaos, we notice something even deeper. Gaia, Earth, the habitable space, the body of the world. Eros, desire, the force that joins, moves, and fertilizes. Erebus and Nyx, the original darkness, the womb of the invisible. In other words, out of chaos come the fundamental elements of human existence: body, love, and shadow. Chaos doesn't just come before creation, it grounds it. Without it, nothing would come to light. Without it, life would be a machine with no mystery. With the rise of rational philosophy, especially with Plato and Aristotle, chaos slowly gets pushed aside. It starts to be seen as something to be overcome, as a failure of nature or of the soul. But maybe that cost us something. By exalting only reason and order, we lost our sense of reverence for mystery, for what can't be controlled, for the fertile emptiness where everything is born. We reduced existence to formulas and forgot that reality begins where words still can't reach. Today, with advances in quantum physics, cosmology, and complexity theory, that archaic vision starts to gain new strength. Scientists also talk about a universe that began from a point of instability, from quantum fluctuations in the vacuum. Even in biology, we see that life evolves through the unpredictable. What Hesiod wrote in mythical language, modern science rediscovers with different names. And maybe, more than ever, it's time to reconcile philosophy with chaos. To understand that the unknown is not our enemy. It's the dark soil from which every light grows. To accept chaos as genesis is to accept that life doesn't hand us certainties. It gives us open spaces, instabilities, gaps. And it's with that we're called to create. If life was static, it would be sterile. If everything were clear from the very beginning, there would be no freedom. Chaos as origin gives us the right to begin again, to invent, to fail. And it also gives us the right not to know. There's an ancient kind of wisdom, older than empires, softer than the wind, and stronger than rigidity. It doesn't force, it doesn't dominate, it simply flows. That wisdom has a name, Tao, and it was Laozi, a Chinese sage from the 6th century BC, who left us the most precious path to understand it, the Tao Te Ching. A short work with 81 enigmatic chapters that quietly carries the weight of an entire philosophy. A philosophy that doesn't try to fix the world, but to understand it through its fluidity, its spontaneity, its subtle chaos. Laozi opens the Tao Te Ching with a warning. The Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. Right there, we're pushed out of the usual logical mindset. We're not talking about a fixed concept or a divine being in the Western sense. The Tao is the invisible flow of reality. It's the unnameable principle that sustains the universe, that guides the growth of trees, the current of rivers, the sunrise and sunset. The Tao doesn't command, control, or explain. It acts without forcing. And that's where one of the central ideas of Taoism comes from, Wu Wei. Wu Wei is often translated as non-action, but that can be misleading. Wu Wei is not laziness, passivity, or doing nothing. It's a way of acting that doesn't go against the natural flow of things. It's like rowing with the current instead of fighting against it. It's acting in a subtle, light way, in tune with the rhythm of the universe. It's stepping in when needed, but never with arrogance, never trying to bend reality by brute force. In practice, Wu Wei is the opposite of obsessive control. It's the wisdom of knowing when to act, and even more important, when not to. Unlike much of Western tradition, which often sees chaos as a threat and order as salvation, Taoism looks at the world differently. For Laozi, true order is not imposed from the outside. It arises naturally, spontaneously, when we stop interfering so much. It's like a garden. If you try to control every leaf, every root, every insect, it dies. But if you care for the soil and respect the rhythm of nature, harmony appears on its own. That's the logic of the Tao. What we call chaos is often just our inability to see the hidden rhythm of reality. When we loosen our grip, order shows up. Laozi compares the sage to a child, to a piece of uncarved wood, to flowing water. These images reveal an ideal very different from what we usually chase. Instead of strength, flexibility. Instead of rigidity, adaptation. Instead of power, surrender. What is soft and yielding lasts longer. What is hard and rigid breaks. Water, for example, looks weak, but over time it carves through stone. It doesn't resist, doesn't challenge, doesn't try to control, but it transforms everything it touches. That's the Taoist attitude toward chaos. It's not about beating reality. It's about learning how to move with it. Life changes. Things slip through our fingers. The future is uncertain, but instead of panicking, the sage breathes, watches, and moves lightly. This philosophy isn't some distant abstraction. It can be lived here and now, and it can change the way we deal with the world, with others, and with ourselves. At work, Wu Wei is doing what needs to be done with presence, without anxiety, without micromanaging everything, without clinging to the outcome. In relationships, Wu Wei is not forcing connections, not trying to control other people's feelings, but giving space for the other person to show who they are. In your inner life, Wu Wei is watching your own thoughts without trying to choke them, allowing your mind to reorganize itself naturally. In every case, it's a deep practice of humility. It's recognizing that the universe has its own rhythm, and that our constant interference often makes things worse. In a time of urgency, pressure, and overload, Taoism offers something rare, a pause. Laozi doesn't promise ready-made answers or magic formulas. He simply invites you to observe how nature works, how the Tao moves, without hurry, without competition, without ego. The great Tao flows everywhere. To the left and to the right, it unfolds. That's the invitation of Wu Wei. Act gently, breathe with presence, live with openness. It's not about hiding from the world, it's about finding a new way to live in it. We live in an age obsessed with control. Productivity has become a dogma. Speed has become an addiction. We're always trying to fix everything, interfere in everything, plan even the unpredictable. And that builds tension. It builds frustration. It feeds the illusion that if something went wrong, it's because we didn't try hard enough. The Tao teaches something else. Not everything needs fixing. Not every problem needs an answer. Not every confusion is a mistake. Maybe what we call chaos is just the universe breathing. Maybe life, if we let it flow a little more, reorganizes itself. In the Tao Te Ching, there's a deep reverence for silence, for emptiness, for deep listening. The Tao is empty, but in its use, it is never exhausted. Silence here is not absence, it's fertile space. It's where the Tao can show itself. Maybe that's why Wu Wei also means listening before acting, stopping, breathing, feeling, letting the situation reveal itself, and only then acting, and acting lightly. This wisdom is simple, but not easy. It demands letting go of the ego, and above all, it demands trust. Trusting the Tao is trusting that life has a flow that goes beyond our understanding. It's accepting that not everything depends on our strength, our rush, our logic. It's trusting that if we act with balance, the world rearranges itself, not because we control it, but because we cooperate with the dance of reality. It's a different kind of courage, the courage not to control, the courage to allow, the courage to flow. At the center of human experience, there's a tension that never really goes away, the tension between what we already know and what we still don't understand, between the safety of structure and the abyss of the unknown, between order and chaos. Jordan Peterson, clinical psychologist, Canadian intellectual, and author of books like 12 Rules for Life and Maps of Meaning, turned this duality into a symbolic map of the human condition. For him, this isn't just a literary metaphor, but a deep psychological reality, an archetypal structure that shapes how we perceive, feel, and act in the world. Peterson argues that in all cultures, myths, and symbolic systems, we find two central elements, order and chaos. He doesn't define them simply as disorganization and organization, but as universal archetypal fields that represent the totality of human experience. Order is what we already know. Social structures, customs, language, laws, rituals. It's the familiar world, the realm of predictability and comfort. It's where life seems to make sense, where we find safety and continuity. Peterson associates this field with the archetypal masculine, linked to tradition, stability, and protection. Chaos, on the other hand, is the unknown. It's the territory beyond the map, the realm of what hasn't been named yet. It's the place where anything can happen, creation or destruction. It's where order falls apart, where structure collapses, and he associates it with the archetypal feminine, not as gender, but as a universal symbol of mystery, fertility, uncertainty, and rebirth. Peterson drinks directly from the source of Carl Gustav Jung. Jung believed human beings carry within them archetypal images, symbolic structures that aren't learned from culture, but inherited from the collective psyche of humanity. These archetypes show up in myths, dreams, religions, and stories from every era. And the oldest of them is the hero, who must confront chaos in order to bring about transformation. Peterson deepens this image. Chaos isn't just something out there. It lives inside us too, in the form of anxiety, fear, confusion, and loss of purpose. And the hero, in this context, is the one who willingly chooses to cross that unknown territory in order to come back with meaning. All the great mythic narratives follow this symbolic structure. Peterson analyzes ancient myths, from Babylon and Egypt to the Judeo-Christian tradition and modern legends, and shows that the hero pattern is universal. The hero starts in a state of relative order. Something disruptive happens, a loss, a threat, a calling. He's thrown into chaos, the unknown territory where he must face symbolic monsters. If he has enough courage, he returns transformed and brings something valuable back to the community: wisdom, healing, renewal. That's exactly what we see in myths like Tiamat, the Mesopotamian goddess of chaos, who is slain by Marduk, the hero who creates the world from her body; Horus, who defeats Seth, the Egyptian god of chaos, and restores order; Christ, who descends into the symbolic hell of pain and betrayal and returns with redemption. And even in modern stories, like Star Wars, Harry Potter, or The Matrix, the same pattern shows up again and again. For Peterson, these stories aren't just entertainment. They're deep maps of the soul. He says, it's in the voluntary confrontation with chaos that meaning is found. Running away from chaos, whether it appears as emotional suffering, an existential crisis, or social breakdown, only makes it stronger. But those who face it honestly, with courage, open up the possibility of growth, reorganization, and truth. That's the foundation of the personal responsibility he emphasizes in 12 Rules for Life. It's not about trying to dominate the entire world by brute force. It starts with yourself. Clean your room, says one of his rules, not as a shallow gesture, but as a symbolic act of bringing order to the small patch of chaos around you before you try to take on the world. That's the proposal. You are the hero of your own journey, and your first dragon is your own inner chaos. Interestingly, Peterson doesn't demonize chaos. He recognizes that as frightening as it is, chaos is also the source of everything new. Without chaos, there's no learning, no transformation, no creativity. Big ideas are born when an old structure breaks. Innovation shows up when something that seemed solid falls apart. But for that to become growth, you need conscious courage. The encounter with chaos can't just be accidental. It has to be voluntary. That's where the hero's ethics lies. And just as chaos can destroy, too much order can suffocate. Peterson warns us about authoritarianism, ideological rigidity, and fanaticism. He shows that a society with absolute order turns into tyranny. Orders that never open up to the new end up killing the very possibility of life. Life needs balance. Enough structure to support you, and enough chaos to allow change. That balance is never static. It has to be sought out constantly, and that demands individual responsibility. Peterson weaves together several traditions of knowledge to build his view. Clinical psychology, to understand trauma and individual healing. Mythology, to reveal the symbolic patterns of the soul. Neuroscience, to explain how fear and action are wired in the brain. Existential philosophy, especially Kierkegaard, Nietzsche, and Dostoevsky, to give depth to responsibility, suffering, and freedom. This combination makes his thought both psychological and mythic, rational and symbolic, clinical and epic. In a world marked by uncertainty, polarization, and rupture, Peterson's ideas hit a nerve. Many people live immersed in modern chaos, emotional instability, toxic social media, collapsing values, identity crises. Others hide in rigid orders, closed ideologies, inflexible dogmas. Peterson suggests a different path, conscious crossing. The courage to walk between the known and the unknown, to live on the threshold between order and chaos. It's in that in-between space that real freedom lives, and real danger too. But it's also where the possibility of meaning reveals itself. In the world of words, not everything is what it seems. A sentence can say more than it appears to say. A text can contradict itself. A concept can slip through your fingers, even when it looks solid. For Jacques Derrida, one of the most influential and mysterious philosophers of the 20th century, chaos isn't just out there in external reality. It's inside language. It's in the text. It's in thought. It's in meaning. And it's not about ruin or error. It's about something much deeper. Every meaning is unstable, and every structure carries within itself the seed of its own deconstruction. Jacques Derrida was born in Algeria in 1930, in a world divided by colonization, wars, and cultural tension. These experiences deeply marked his work. He grew up between languages, between cultures, between borders, and that shaped the way he thought. His philosophy is born from distrust. Distrust of clarity, distrust of truth as something closed and finished, distrust of language as a neutral tool. But this distrust isn't just skepticism, it's creative. It proposes a new way of thinking, not chasing solid foundations anymore, but learning to live inside the movement of thought. And that's where deconstruction comes in. What is deconstruction? The word deconstruction became trendy in a lot of places. But what Derrida was proposing wasn't just criticizing or taking something apart. It's more subtle and more radical. To deconstruct, for Derrida, is to show that every system of thought, every language, every structure carries internal tensions within itself. It's to show that a text never says exactly what it thinks it's saying. There's always an excess of meaning or a crack inside the discourse. And those gaps are not accidents. They're built in. There is no pure meaning. There is no word that represents something in a total, complete way. There's always a shift. There's always something slipping away. Derrida wasn't talking about chaos in the usual sense, but about the impossibility of fully pinning down meaning. He showed that texts are not closed blocks, they're playing fields, networks of signifiers that slide, rearrange, and reflect one another. This applies to everything: philosophy, literature, law, politics, religion. There is no completely neutral discourse. There is no innocent word. There is no final interpretation. And that doesn't mean anything goes. It means meaning is always on the move, open, fluid, multiple. For many earlier philosophers like Plato, writing was viewed with suspicion. Writing was seen as a copy of speech, and speech, in turn, as a copy of the idea. So the further you get from the origin, the weaker the meaning becomes. Derrida flips that. He says, writing is not the problem. It's how thought itself works. Writing is rupture. It's repetition with difference. It's the place where meaning is never fully complete. That's why deconstruction is so powerful. It doesn't destroy, it reveals. It reveals that language is not a clear window to reality, but an unstable field where reality is constantly contested. Derrida loved to put pressure on Western philosophy's favorite binaries. One of the main ones is presence versus absence. Western thought has always favored presence. Presence of the idea, presence of the subject, presence of truth, presence of meaning. But Derrida asks, what if what we call presence always depends on some kind of absence? What if identity only exists in relation to the other? What if clarity only makes sense because there is shadow? This kind of thinking breaks the illusion of purity. It shows that conceptual borders are porous, and that symbolic chaos is not a flaw. It's the structure itself. So deconstruction is not just a method. It's a way of being in the world. It's a way of thinking that doesn't look for a place to rest. It doesn't get comfortable in certainties. It's not afraid of meanings falling apart. On the contrary, it finds a space for creation right there. If meaning is never fixed, then there is always room for reinterpretation, for shifting, for reinventing. The chaos of the text, for Derrida, is like fertile ground. The deeper you go, the more you realize there are hidden layers, mirror games, traces of something that isn't said, but keeps insisting on showing up. Deconstruction has consequences far beyond textual theory. It touches politics, ethics, justice. Derrida asks, what if our institutions, our legal systems, our ideas of truth and authority also carry internal tensions that need to be deconstructed? And more, what if justice isn't a finished structure, but a constant demand, always delayed, always open? That changes everything. It calls us to a more watchful, humble, attentive attitude. Because when we deconstruct, we're not just reading a text, we're reading the world. It's important to say, Derrida's philosophy is not comfortable. It pulls the ground out from under your feet. It dismantles the structures we lean on to think, speak, and live. That's why a lot of people resist it. They prefer clear speech, fixed ideas, stable definitions. But Derrida would say, those structures are already cracked. You're just pretending not to see it. Deconstruction doesn't create chaos. It just reveals the chaos that was already there. And by doing that, it opens space for a new kind of listening, a new kind of thinking, a new way of living inside language. Derrida taught us to read more carefully, to listen to what isn't said, to notice the silences in the text, the margins, the noise. He taught us that every certainty can and should be questioned, that thinking is not a straight road, but a moving maze, and at the heart of that maze, there is no fixed center, but a subtle, creative, revealing kind of chaos. There are moments when the world feels empty. Nothing is out of place, but everything seems to lose its weight. Things are still where they've always been, but something inside cracks, and what's left is a strange silence, an inner void, an absence we don't know how to name. Martin Heidegger, one of the most enigmatic philosophers of the 20th century, gave a name to this deep and rare feeling, ontological anxiety. And for him, this anxiety is not a psychological breakdown. It's an existential opening. It's the human being coming face to face with the groundless bottom of existence, with nothingness. To understand Heidegger, you need to start from his basic question, the question of being. In his book Being and Time, Sein und Zeit, 1927, he criticizes the philosophical tradition for forgetting the most fundamental question of all. What is being? Philosophy, he says, got too caught up with things, with what they are, how they work, what properties they have, but forgot to ask what it means to be, simply to be. Heidegger wants to bring that question back, and to do that, he starts from our most basic experience, the fact that we are in the world. He calls the human being Dasein, which in German literally means being there. It's not a biological definition or a spiritual label. It's the way we exist, as presence in the world, thrown into it, aware, unfinished. Dasein is the only being that asks about its own being. It's the only one that experiences existence as a problem, and that's exactly what makes us human. But Dasein is not a finished being. It is project, possibility, openness. It doesn't have a ready-made essence. It is always in the process of becoming, always in relation with time, the world, other people, and above all, with nothingness. Anxiety, angst in German, is different from fear. Fear has an object. We're afraid of something, death, loss, pain. But anxiety has no object. It's empty, silent, unfocused. Heidegger describes it like this. In anxiety, the things of the world lose their meaning. The world as such pulls away, and Dasein is left alone with nothing. The cup, the clock, the phone, the to-do list, everything is still there, but it all loses meaning. Nothing speaks, nothing calls, everything feels hollow. It's as if the invisible structure that supports our familiarity with the world suddenly collapses. And in that silent collapse, we come face to face with the bottomless depth of existence. This is where chaos appears, not as outer confusion, but as a breakdown of inner meaning. Anxiety doesn't reveal a disorder in the world. It reveals the lack of any built-in meaning in existence itself. Heidegger shows us that, deep down, there is no fixed foundation for life, no purpose given in advance, no instruction manual. Being is an abyss, and we are thrown into it. This chaos is not a mistake. It is the very structure of existence. And when anxiety passes through us, it unmasks us. It rips us away from our distractions and puts us face to face with the naked truth. We are here, and nobody knows why. Nothingness for Heidegger is not a thing. It's not a place. It's the limit condition of experience. It's the background that allows being to show up at all. It's what, when it reveals itself, makes the human being aware of itself as finite. Nothingness is not simply the opposite of being, but belongs to being itself. That means ontological chaos is not the end of meaning. It's the space where meaning has to be created. But now, without guarantees, without dogmas, without absolute truths. Anxiety, then, is not just suffering, it's revelation. It pulls us out of everyday superficiality and puts us in touch with the depth of being. Most of the time, Dasein lives in a kind of existential sleep, be. Heidegger calls this falling, verfallen, a way of existing where we simply follow the rules, repeat behaviors, and avoid thinking about being. We live as if everything already had meaning, as if routine were enough, as if we were never going to die. But anxiety breaks this illusion. It tears the veil and reminds us that we are finite, unfinished, mortal. Heidegger is not a nihilist. He doesn't say life has no value. He says life doesn't come with value ready-made, and that only when we confront death, not as some event in the future, but as a constant possibility, do we start to live authentically. He calls this attitude being toward death, Sein zum Tod. It's not a morbid obsession, it's a radical awareness of finitude. And that awareness sets us free. Because once we know we're going to die, we know time is short. Existence becomes urgent. Our choices matter. It's in this confrontation with the chaos of nothingness that we can truly take hold of our lives. Authenticity, for Heidegger, is not being true to yourself in the modern motivational sense. It's taking on your own existence as an open project. It's stopping living in the impersonal mode. They say this, they do that, and really owning your being. It's living knowing there are no guarantees, and still choosing with courage, acting with responsibility, existing with intensity. That's what makes anxiety a philosophical and transformative experience. It's not just a breakdown, it's a calling. We live in an anxious age, connected, productive, fast, but often empty. Anxiety is no longer the exception, it's a symptom. But maybe we're just trying to avoid the inevitable. The confrontation with nothingness. The chaos at the base of existence. Heidegger offers a brave alternative. Stop running. Look into the abyss and learn to live with it, not in spite of it. Ontological anxiety doesn't have to paralyze us. It can wake us up. It can teach us that existence doesn't need a ready-made meaning, because existence itself is the space where meaning can be created. In that sense, chaos is not the end. It's the beginning. Every day, without even noticing, you're making a bet that the sun will rise tomorrow. You trust that when you flip a switch, the light will turn on. You expect that when you turn a key, the door will open. That confidence, so automatic, so natural, is at the core of everything we call knowledge, routine, science, and civilization. But what if it's just a habit? What if what we call cause and effect isn't a rational truth, but a mental habit we've learned to repeat? That's where David Hume comes in, the 18th century Scottish philosopher who had the courage to ask a question that's as simple as it is devastating. How do we know that one thing causes another? Hume was born in 1711 in Edinburgh, right in the middle of the Enlightenment, an age of faith in reason, science, and progress. But unlike many of his contemporaries, he wasn't satisfied with easy explanations. His philosophy is like a microscope aimed at the human mind. He wants to understand how we think, how we know ourselves, how we build the idea of truth. And in doing that, he opens a crack right inside reason itself. From childhood, we learn that the world works through cause and effect. Fire burns, a rock falls, rain gets things wet, medicine heals. But Hume asks, why do we believe one thing causes another? And he answers with brutal honesty, we don't actually know. We never see the cause. We only see events that repeat. For example, you see one billiard ball hit another and the second one moves. You see that happen 1,000 times. Then you conclude, the first ball caused the second one to move. But what did you really see? You only saw one event followed by another, close in time and space. You didn't see causality itself. You inferred it. You got used to it. And here, Hume is merciless. The necessary connection between cause and effect is not perceived by the senses. It is only an expectation formed by habit. The human mind hates randomness. It prefers the illusion of control. So it creates patterns, repeats experiences, builds expectations. But all of that, Hume says, is psychological, not rational. Custom is the great guide of human life. In other words, it's not reason that guarantees causality. It's habit, and habit is fragile, unstable, and always exposed to the unexpected. Deep down, we have no way to prove that the future will behave like the past. We can't logically demonstrate that the sun will rise tomorrow just because it always has. It sounds absurd, but it's a real wound in the idea of absolute knowledge. Hume forces us to face something uncomfortable. Reality might be a lot more chaotic than our reason can handle. The human mind creates a stable story. Cause and effect, predictability, regularity. But that story might just be a safety bubble. Causality, so widely used in science, ethics, and law, isn't something we observe. It's something we infer. It's a belief based on repetition, but one that can't actually guarantee the future. That's the heart of the so-called problem of induction. How can we rationally justify that what happened many times in the past will continue to happen in the future? Hume's answer: we can't. We only believe that because of habit, not because of logic. Radical skepticism. Not exactly. Hume isn't a nihilist. He's not saying we should stop trusting everything. He just puts reason back in its proper place. Reason for him can't give us absolute certainty, but that doesn't mean we should live paralyzed. In practice, Hume admits that we have to live by habit and that this is necessary. But he invites us to be more humble about what we call knowledge. Maybe a lot of what we take as truth is just repetition without reflection, and recognizing that is the first step toward a different kind of clarity. Hume's ideas caused a deep shock. Kant famously said he was awakened from his dogmatic slumber after reading Hume. Science, when it ran into the problem of causality, had to rethink its logical foundations. And even today, debates about probability, statistics, prediction, and uncertainty still carry Hume's fingerprints. The modern world was forced to admit we don't have absolute control. We don't have logical guarantees about what's coming. Causality is a bet based on past experience. Hume's greatness lies in revealing what hides behind our apparent stability. He shows that blind faith in reason can be a kind of arrogance, and that maybe, instead of trying to dominate the world, we should approach it with more attention, more listening, more openness. It's as if he were saying, chaos is always waiting in the wings, but how we face it is what reveals who we are. Hume's thought is especially relevant in times of uncertainty. We live in a world where the unpredictable has become normal. Economic crises, climate change, technological leaps, everything changes too fast. And faced with that, many people cling to fragile certainties, easy answers, rigid ideologies. But Hume invites us to a different kind of strength, the strength to live without guarantees, to recognize that knowledge has limits, that the future is open, that habit is not the same as truth, and that even so, we can keep going. Hume doesn't destroy reason, he purifies it. He doesn't say there is no truth. He says, be humble about what you call truth, and that is deeply liberating. Because when we accept that the world isn't fully predictable, we make room for doubt, for questioning, for creativity. We step out of autopilot. We start thinking again. We choose to live with awareness, even without control. What if your life had to repeat exactly as it is, for all eternity? Every moment, every choice, every gesture, every silence, everything, what you loved, what you lost, what you endured, coming back again and again with no changes at all. How would that make you feel? Fear, guilt, relief, or responsibility? That's the philosophical punch of the eternal return, an idea that runs across centuries, from the ancient Greek Stoics to Nietzsche in the 19th century, and that challenges how we see time, life, and chaos. Long before Nietzsche, the Stoic philosophers like Zeno, Seneca, Epictetus, and Marcus Aurelius already saw time as something cyclical. For them, the universe goes through huge cycles, great cosmic fires that burn and then regenerate everything. Everything that exists returns. Everything that happens has already happened. Everything that was will be again. This eternal movement for the Stoics isn't despair, it's order. They believed the universe is governed by a cosmic reason, logos, and that the cycle of return is part of this universal harmony. Chaos, in this view, is just an appearance. What looks unstable to us is actually a perfectly ordered cosmic dance. And what attitude should we have toward this? Acceptance. The famous amor fati, love of fate. The Stoics didn't just tolerate fate, They said, love it. Don't fight what you can't control. Don't curse what happens in the world. Love every event as if it were necessary. This ethic of acceptance isn't resignation, it's inner strength. It's understanding that what happens isn't good or bad in itself, but gains meaning from how you choose to respond. And if everything returns eternally, then your dignity is in living each moment as if it were eternal. Centuries later, Friedrich Nietzsche picks up this idea, but turns it into something much more radical. In The Gay Science, he writes, "What if some day or night a demon were to steal after you into your loneliest loneliness and say, 'This life as you now live it and have lived it, you will have to live once more, and innumerable times more, and there will be nothing new in it. But every pain and every joy and every thought and sigh will have to return to you, in the same succession and sequence.'" Nietzsche isn't saying eternal return is scientifically true. He's using it as an existential experiment. How would you react to that revelation? If the idea destroys you, maybe your life isn't being lived fully. If the idea lifts you up, maybe you're in harmony with your own fate. Eternal return becomes a kind of ethical stress test. Are you living in a way that you could stand to repeat it forever? But why does Nietzsche connect this repetition to a chaotic world? Because unlike the Stoics, he doesn't believe in an ordering logos. There's no cosmic reason organizing everything. There is no God, no final goal, no built-in purpose. For Nietzsche, the universe is pure becoming, pure energy in constant transformation. No beginning, no end, no direction. And eternal return, in this universe without purpose or finish line, exposes the absolute chaos of time. Time is not a straight line. It's not a staircase leading somewhere. It's a circle, spinning endlessly on itself. The result is devastating, but also freeing. If everything returns, and there's no given meaning, then everything depends on how you position yourself toward your life. Nietzsche invites us to drop the illusion of a future redemption. There's no guaranteed happy ending, no reward after suffering. There is only this moment, and it might repeat forever. That's why he says, become who you are. Because if everything returns, then every choice matters. Every gesture is eternal. Every act echoes forever. The ethic of eternal return isn't moralistic. Nietzsche isn't interested in judging between good and evil in the traditional way. He wants to know, are you living with intensity? Are you saying yes to your existence, with everything it has of tragedy, beauty, pain, and chaos? If the answer is yes, then you can face eternal return not with fear, but with affirmation. Not as a sentence, but as a celebration. The chaos of time, in Nietzsche's philosophy, becomes a test of greatness. It separates the weak from the strong, not in terms of physical strength, but in terms of the ability to affirm life in its totality. Nietzsche doesn't want you to run from suffering. He wants you to integrate it, to be able to say, yes, I lived, yes, I chose, yes, I can stand to live all of this again, because it was mine. Eternal return is also an attack on the idea of salvation. Nietzsche hated the kind of thinking that puts redemption somewhere else, in the afterlife, in the future, in some abstract eternity. For him, that hope is a subtle way of denying life. If you can only endure the present because you believe in a future reward, then you're not really living, you're just enduring. The idea of eternal return blows that logic up. It demands that you affirm the now, that you make peace with reality, that you love the moment, not because it leads somewhere else, but because of what it is. Nietzsche knew eternal return is a heavy idea. He calls it the heaviest weight, because repeating your life exactly as it is, with all its flaws, is a deep challenge. But it can also be a path to freedom. If you can live as if everything were eternal, then you're truly awake. You've stopped being a sleepwalker waiting for paradise and become a creator of your own destiny. The modern idea of linear progress dies in front of eternal return. We're not walking toward a final destination. We're moving inside a cycle. And that changes everything. The only redemption possible is to intensify life, to turn the moment into eternity, to give shape to chaos, to create meaning, not outside of time, but inside the very repetition of it. There are moments in history when the world collapses. Wars, social breakdowns, the failure of official narratives, and then everything that once seemed to make sense falls apart. How do you respond to that? How do you react when the logic that held civilization together turns out to be an illusion? Some people try to rebuild. Others choose a more radical kind of resistance, blowing up language, art, structure, and the very idea of reason itself. That's how two of the most provocative movements of the 20th century were born: Dadaism and surrealism. Both are children of chaos. Both refuse the comfort of order. Both are basically shouting, in different ways, if the world is absurd, then art will be too. Dadaism appears in 1916, right in the middle of World War I, in neutral Zurich, as an artistic act of resistance to barbarism, but not a rational, political, or moral kind of resistance. A resistance through absurdity, through scandal, through nonsense. If the world has gone insane, why should art keep pretending to be normal? Tristan Tzara, a Romanian poet, is one of the central figures of the movement. In his Dada manifesto, he writes, "Dada means nothing. Dada is meaningless. Dada doesn't mean anything. Dada is the anti-poetry of poetry. Dada is the scream of the spirit against mediocrity. Dada has no doctrine, no program. It's a living provocation." Dadaism deliberately smashes what we call good taste, coherence, and aesthetic rationality. If before, art chased harmony, beauty, representation, now it becomes rupture, shock, deformation. Poems made from randomly cut out words, collages using urban trash, performances with no logic, theatrical scandals. All of that is Dada, not to entertain, but to question, to wound linear thinking, to mock the idea that human beings are rational, to show that collapse is everywhere, even inside language itself. Dadaism is art at war, art as aesthetic chaos that reflects the chaos of the world. And its target wasn't just traditional art, it was also the idea of progress, blind science, the reason used to justify war, violent nationalism, the bourgeois system that turned human beings into cogs. Dadaism is a broken mirror. It doesn't offer reconstruction, it shows the ruins. That's why its tone is often cynical, sarcastic, mocking. It's as if it was saying, "You created an insane world, so our art will be even more insane." But while Dada screams, surrealism dreams. If Dada destroys meaning, surrealism looks for another kind of meaning, deeper, more ambiguous, more psychological. Officially founded in 1924 with André Breton's Surrealist Manifesto, surrealism starts from a bold idea: visible reality is not enough. What we see, what we call real, is a tamed surface. Under that surface, there's a world of impulses, images, symbols, desires, nightmares. That's the real field of human experience, the unconscious. If Dada reacted to the collapse of the world with aesthetic anarchy, surrealism dives into the inner chaos of the mind. Inspired by Freud's psychoanalysis, surrealists believed that art should free repressed impulses, uncover hidden symbols, and access the logic of dreams. To do that, they created techniques like automatic writing, letting the hand write without rational censorship, exquisite corpse, collective and random creation of texts and images, juxtaposition of contradictory images, like in Salvador Dali's paintings or Man Ray's photos. The goal was to break the logic of Western rationality and give voice to what lies behind words, images, and consciousness. Breton believed imagination was a revolutionary tool, not revolutionary in the usual political sense, but in the sense of transforming perception, of breaking with domesticated reality, of making the invisible speak. Surrealism is pure psychic automatism, he wrote. It's thought dictated in the absence of any control by reason, beyond any moral or aesthetic concern. For him, the surreal wasn't the opposite of the real. It was an expansion of the real, a bigger, stranger, truer real. A real where inner chaos is allowed to appear. Surrealism is not afraid of the irrational. On the contrary, it embraces it, because it sees that reason alone is way too poor to explain human beings. In dreams, in desires, in delirium, there's a truth that escapes logic. And that truth, even if chaotic, needs to be heard. That's why surrealism is so tied to poetry, eroticism, magic, and symbolism. It's an attempt to break the borders between waking and dreaming, between conscious and unconscious, between reason and madness. Both Dada and surrealism start from the same conviction: reason failed. Language is unstable. The world is unpredictable, and chaos can't be ignored anymore. But where Dada laughs and destroys, surrealism digs and reveals. One tries to cancel meaning, the other tries to find a new meaning, inside non-meaning. Both, however, move in the same territory, a radical critique of rationalist modernity. They show that art doesn't have to represent the world. It can blow the world up, or invent another one. Today, the impact of these movements is still everywhere. In contemporary art, experimental cinema, advertising, music, avant-garde theatre, you can hear echoes of Dada and surrealism. On the internet, in meme collages, in fragmented languages, you can see the continuity of nonsense as a form of critique. More than aesthetic schools, Dada and surrealism are attitudes toward collapse. Attitudes that say, if the system that holds the world together is insane, then you have to go crazy to resist. You have to inhabit chaos and turn it into art. Forget everything you learned about how thinking should work. Forget the idea of beginning, middle, and end. Forget linear logic, fixed concepts, neat hierarchies, and get ready for a trip through a territory where thought doesn't grow like a tree, but spreads like a rhizome. That's the radical proposal of Gilles Deleuze and Félix Guattari, two of the most influential and unsettling philosophers of the 20th century. Together, they invite us to rethink thinking itself, not as something that seeks control, unity, or clarity, but as an open, chaotic, creative field. Traditional philosophy has always loved order, classifications, definitions, systems. From Aristotle's logic to Descartes' rationalism, thinking was, for a long time, about organizing, separating, and ranking. Deleuze and Guattari go in the opposite direction. They believe that this way of thinking traps thought. It makes it spin around the same structures, the same centers, the same truths. Moody, for them, thinking should be nomadic, expansive, free. So they propose a new philosophical metaphor, the rhizome. In botany, a rhizome is a root that grows horizontally without a fixed center. It's like ginger, bamboo, grass. It spreads, connects, sprouts in unpredictable places. It has no clear beginning or end, no hierarchy. For Deleuze and Guattari, thought should work like that, not like a tree with a trunk and ordered branches, but like a rhizomatic field, where ideas connect by affinities, jumps, and flows. In 1,000 Plateaus, they write, "A rhizome has no beginning or end. It is always in the middle, between things, into being." Thinking, in this model, isn't walking a straight line. It's navigating a map that's always changing, that grows in every direction, that embraces chaos. 1,000 Plateaus is not a normal book. You can read it in any order. It doesn't follow traditional chapters or a linear argument. It's a collection of ideas, or better, of plateaus, as they call them, that connect by intensity, not sequence. Each plateau is a zone of vibration, a conceptual field where different disciplines, philosophy, psychoanalysis, biology, politics, art, cross, clash, and transform each other. The book is like a body without fixed organs, a mutating, multiple, unruly organism. It's not trying to teach you a doctrine, it's trying to provoke thinking, to infect the mind with multiplicity, to disorganize in order to free. For Deleuze and Guattari, what defines something is not its essence, but its connections. You are not a closed-off self, you are a multiplicity, a field of forces, effects, relationships, and crossings. That's why they push back against the idea of a fixed identity. They say, don't ask what something is, ask what it can do. A body, a concept, an idea, they're all potentials for connection. What matters is not the form, but the movement. Not the essence, but the capacity to change. In their later work, especially in What is Philosophy, they develop the idea of chaosmosis, a fusion of chaos plus osmosis, an interaction with chaos that doesn't destroy, but fertilizes. Chaos, for them, is not the absence of meaning. It's an excess of possibilities. It's the point where anything can happen. And it's exactly at that point that philosophical, artistic, and existential creation is born. Chaos is the future, but only if we can extract a consistency from it. So philosophy is no longer a search for eternal truths. It becomes an act of creation inside chaos. It's like sailing through a storm, not to dominate it, but to dance with it. Deleuze and Guattari break down the wall between philosophy and art. For them, real thinking is always also creation. And to create is to give form to chaos, without killing it, without taming it completely. The philosopher is not the one who explains the world. It's the one who invents new ways of thinking, new ways of living, new circuits of desire. That's why they draw inspiration from musicians, painters, filmmakers, and writers. Kafka's writing, Francis Bacon's paintings, Godard's films. Because in them they see not just aesthetics, but living thought. Thought that escapes form and becomes an event. One of Deleuze and Guattari's favorite targets are apparatuses of capture, systems that try to fix, tame, and normalize, the state that wants to organize thought, the school that produces standardized minds, the psychoanalysis that reduces everything to the father figure, the language that forces everything to make sense. They reject all of that because they know that behind order, there's often repression, and behind logic, there's symbolic violence. To think for them is to escape capture, to resist normalization, to open new lines of flight. A line of flight is not a cowardly escape, it's a force of invention, a way of breaking out of an oppressive system by creating something new. It can be a new way of living, a new way of loving, a new kind of thought. Their philosophy is political, but not in a party sense. It's political because it deals with forces, resistances, powers, because it sees human beings as creators of worlds. Despite all the chaos, Deleuze and Guattari are not thinkers of despair. They believe in the power of life, in joy as a form of resistance, in creation as a way of existing. That's why their philosophy is hard, but never cold. It pulses, it challenges, it transforms. They don't want you to repeat concepts. They want you to think with your whole body, with desire, with feeling, with intensity. The rhizome, multiplicity, chaosmosis, all of that points to a new mental ecology, a way of existing that's more open, more sensitive, more creative. Deleuze and Guattari want us to think the way nature thinks, in networks, in flows, in differences. No center, no end, no dogma. It's not easy, but maybe it's necessary. In a world that tries, all the time, to squeeze us into a single shape. We live in a time where our old certainties are falling apart. Old truths no longer explain reality. The world feels more and more unpredictable, interconnected, unstable. People say all the time that we live in chaos, but what if this chaos isn't the end of everything? What if it's actually part of how life works? What if disorder isn't a mistake, but a creative force? That's exactly what Edgar Morin, one of the greatest living thinkers of our time, is proposing. He's a philosopher who devoted his life to understanding how human thought can deal with the complexity of reality, without reducing it, without oversimplifying it, without pretending the chaos isn't there. Who is Edgar Morin? Edgar Morin was born in France in 1921. Originally named Edgar Nahum, the son of Jewish immigrants, he lived through the horrors of World War II, took part in the resistance against Nazism, and watched the 20th century unfold in all its chaotic intensity. Wars, revolutions, collapses, and rebirths. But instead of giving in to despair, he dedicated himself to thinking about the world as it actually is: multiple, contradictory, unstable. Creator of the idea of complex thought, Morin invites us to abandon reductionist mental models, those that split everything into separate boxes, isolated truths, absolute certainties. Reality, for him, is woven out of paradoxes, overlaps, and networks of interdependence. And chaos, far from being a flaw, is a structural part of that reality. What is complex thinking? Complex here doesn't mean complicated. It comes from complexus. What is woven together? A complex thinking is a way of thinking that recognizes that phenomena cannot be fully separated. Parts and whole interact all the time, opposites can coexist, and everything is connected. It's a way of seeing the world not as a predictable machine, but as a living organism, constantly changing. To get there, we need to accept something crucial. Reality is not made only of order. It's made of a constant tension between order, disorder, and organization. Morin proposes a dynamic interplay between three fundamental forces: order, regularity, stability, repetition; disorder, rupture, the unpredictable, randomness; organization, the emergence of a new form out of the interaction between order and disorder. This breaks with the old Cartesian Newtonian paradigm that saw reality as a giant clock, where everything runs with mathematical precision. Instead, Morin suggests a world closer to life itself, where there are crises, turning points, chaos, but also rebirths, reinventions, creativity. For Edgar Morin, chaos is not the opposite of order, it's part of the game. It's what, by shaking the system, opens space for transformation. Imagine an organism going through a shock, a fever, trauma, mutation. That chaotic moment might lead to collapse, but it can also lead to a higher, more adaptive, more intelligent reorganization. That's how complex systems work, including human beings, societies, and culture. In his words, disorder, by disturbing order, can stimulate organization. Chaos can be a source of new order. That's the key. Chaos is fertile. Drawing from physics, biology, and cybernetics, Morin studies what we call self-organizing systems. These are systems that, even in the middle of disorder, manage to reorganize from within. A simple example: your body. Thousands of processes are happening at the same time: digestion, blood circulation, breathing, neural activity, without a single central commander. Or a beehive. Thousands of bees working together with no centralized plan. Order emerges out of apparent chaos. This principle also applies to societies, ecosystems, and languages. Anything alive is complex, adaptive, unpredictable, and deeply interconnected. The problem, according to Morin, is that modern education and culture have trained us to think in a linear, fragmented, mechanical way. We were taught to separate science from art, reason from emotion, subject from object, humans from nature. But this separation stops us from seeing the real. Because reality is mixture, it's interaction, it's network. Linear thinking chases control. Complex thinking accepts uncertainty, ambiguity, and chaos. And that's not weakness, that's intelligence in action. Morin argues that real intelligence is not about piling up data, but about linking information, connecting different kinds of knowledge, and navigating uncertainty. That's why complex thinking is transdisciplinary. It crosses boundaries. It connects physics with philosophy, biology with sociology, art with politics. Only then can we start to see the world as it is, and not just as we would like it to be. Morin sees crisis as a moment of truth. Crisis breaks what's automatic, exposes the limits of a system, and forces reinvention. He writes, "A crisis is the moment when the impossible can become possible." So he proposes a new kind of ethic, not to avoid chaos, but to learn how to navigate it. Just like a surfer doesn't try to control the ocean, but uses the energy of the wave to move forward, we should also use chaos as a creative force. Morin doesn't give formulas. He offers an invitation: become a complex thinker. What does that mean in practice? Accept uncertainty without being paralyzed. Know that every order is temporary. Recognize that there can be meaning in the unpredictable. Connect knowledge, people, and dimensions of life. Act responsibly, even without guarantees. It's not easy, but it's more realistic, more honest, more human. One of Morin's biggest concerns is education. He believes the world now demands a new way of teaching and learning. An education that doesn't stay stuck in isolated subjects, but forms people who can think in networks, deal with crises, and face uncertainty. That requires a reform of thought itself, a leap in consciousness, a new sensitivity toward life. Contrary to what some might think, complex thinking is not nihilistic. It doesn't deny order, it just refuses to worship it. It recognizes that chaos is part of life's dance, that disorder can generate reinvention, that uncertainty can set us free. In that sense, Edgar Morin's thinking is a kind of clear-eyed hope, not a naive hope, but a hope grounded in the power of complexity. Close your eyes for a moment. Quiet the voice of reason. What do you find behind your conscious thoughts? Maybe scattered images, unresolved memories, unspoken desires, anxieties you don't even know how to name. Behind the rational surface of the mind, there's a deep, dark, unstable territory. A place where logic doesn't rule, where order dissolves, where forces collide without warning. That territory is the unconscious, and its main cartographer was Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud, born in 1856 in Vienna, was a doctor, neurologist, and above all, an archaeologist of the psyche. He dug into what was buried under the speeches of modern rationality. While science was celebrating the power of reason, Freud showed that the mind is not a neat, organized fortress. It's a battlefield. His greatest achievement wasn't inventing the unconscious. The idea already existed before him, but giving it structure, method, and language. And with that, he shook the traditional idea of what a subject, a self, really is. Freud's theory presents the psyche as a structure made of layers and conflicts. Id, the most primitive part, driven by the pleasure principle, where desires, sexual impulses, aggression, and unconscious drives live. Superego, the moral instance, the internalized voice of rules, prohibitions, parents, and society. Ego, the bridge between these forces, the I that tries to mediate the ID's desires and the superego's demands, trying to keep some kind of balance. But that balance is always fragile. For Freud, the mind is structurally unstable. It's the stage for constant inner conflict. Freud's genius was in recognizing that chaos is not an accident of the mind, it's built into it. Repressed desires, childhood traumas, slips of the tongue, dreams, accidental actions. All of that is a sign that there's something in us that escapes control. We are divided subjects. We want and don't want at the same time. We desire what we deny. We fear what we chase. And it's in this play of unconscious forces that the chaos of being human shows up. Freud never said the unconscious is just a random mess. In fact, it follows its own rules, but rules very different from conscious logic. It's timeless. It works through condensation, displacement, symbolism. It's like a wild poet, an artist of language, a body that speaks in metaphors. Dreams, for example, are not just nonsense. They're a path for the unconscious to express itself. A story that seems chaotic at first glance, but is full of hidden meanings, censorships, and disguised desires. Modernity built the image of the subject as rational, transparent, and in control. Freud shows that most of who we are is hidden. We are driven by desires we don't know. We repeat patterns we don't understand. We run from truths we can't bear to face. In that sense, the unconscious is not a glitch. It's the truth of the subject. A tragic, ambiguous, conflict-filled truth. When the unconscious shows up, it often takes the shape of a symptom. Phobias, compulsions, neuroses, anxiety, blockages. A symptom is a coded message. It speaks, but it speaks in code. It's the way chaos finds to express itself without completely breaking social order. That's why the work of psychoanalysis is to listen to this chaos, not to erase it, but to translate it, to give form to what's screaming inside. Freud was also a critic of culture. In his book Civilization and Its Discontents, he shows that progress demands repression. To live in society, we have to hold back our impulses, and that comes at a cost. We pay with guilt, we pay with anxiety, we pay with neurosis. Civilization demands that inner chaos be tamed, but that taming is never complete. The unconscious keeps working, like an underground force, like lava under the surface. One of the core ideas of psychoanalysis is, what gets repressed doesn't disappear. It comes back. It comes back as a symptom, a dream, a slip of the tongue, a wave of anxiety. Freud teaches that the unconscious doesn't stay quiet. It finds ways to leak out, like water seeping through cracks. So the more we ignore our inner chaos, the more it acts underneath everything. Repression isn't control, it's postponement. For Freud, healing is not about eliminating chaos. It's about listening to it, giving it words, giving voice to what was mute, helping the person reconnect with the parts of themselves they pushed away. Psychoanalysis doesn't offer easy comfort. It doesn't promise happiness. It proposes a hard but necessary process, recognizing that we are multiple, contradictory, unfinished. By revealing the unconscious as a chaotic territory, Freud anticipated many ideas that later showed up in philosophy, anthropology, and art. He breaks apart the idea of a unified subject. He shows that identity is always fragile, shifting, constructed, and that the human mind is not a machine. It's an open, living, pulsing system. The unconscious is a reminder that we will never be fully in control of ourselves, and that this lack of control is exactly what makes us human. Paradoxically, it's in this inner chaos that creativity often appears. Great works of art, inventions, discoveries. Many of them are born from psychic conflict, from the attempt to work through what can't be easily said, to give form to what has no name. The unconscious is not only pain, it's also creative power. Poetry, painting, music, cinema, they all talk to this dark zone of the soul, to this unmapped sea inside us. Even with all the criticism Freud has received over time, he's still one of the central figures of modern thought. He taught us to look inward with more depth, to distrust the surface, to listen to what exists beyond words, to understand that psychic chaos is not a defect to be erased. It's part of who we are. Psychoanalysis, as Freud imagined it, is less a cure and more a journey through the dark territory we carry within. A dive into the abyss, not to get lost in it, but to find ourselves again. We live in fast, unstable, disorienting times. Times where everything seems to slip through our fingers. Relationships, jobs, truths, commitments, identities. Nothing seems to last. Nothing seems to stick. That feeling of constant instability has a name. Polish sociologist and philosopher Zygmunt Bauman called it liquid modernity, a powerful metaphor to describe the age we live in, a world where the solid structures of the past have melted, and in their place, we're left with an ocean of uncertainty. What is liquid modernity? Bauman wrote that for centuries, humanity chased solidity. The idea was to build a predictable, safe, ordered world. Science promised control. Politics promised progress. Religion offered meaning. Marriage offered stability. Work offered identity. But that solidity began to crumble, especially at the end of the 20th century. And in place of a solid world, a liquid world emerged. A world where nothing holds its shape for long. In liquid modernity, social forms and institutions no longer keep their shape for long. Bauman writes, "It's like trying to build a house on top of water. Everything moves, everything slips, everything changes before we even understand what's happening." Bauman doesn't romanticize the past. He knows the solid world was also oppressive, more rigid, more hierarchical, more unequal, but it carried a sense of continuity. You more or less knew what to expect from life. Choices were more limited, but also more stable. Liquid modernity, on the other hand, blows the limits wide open. Today we have more freedom than ever, but also more anxiety. Because where everything is possible, nothing is guaranteed. Where everything can change, nothing feels reliable. Freedom without structure is like a flight with no direction. It's exciting, but also dizzying. A liquid identity. In solid modernity, identity was something you built over a lifetime. Today, it's something you constantly perform, tweak, and reinvent. You're not simply someone, you're always becoming. On social media, in the job market, in relationships, you're a project under constant update. And this fluid identity brings a paradox. Freeing on one side, deeply unsettling on the other. Because if nothing in me feels fixed, then who am I? Liquid love. One of Bauman's most well-known themes is liquid love. He noticed that, just like institutions, emotional bonds also became fragile. The fear of commitment grows together with the desire for freedom. Relationships start and end easily. Apps make emotional disposal fast and convenient. The modern ideal seems to be connect, but don't get attached. But Bauman warns, liquid relationships may be light, but they're also lonely. In trying to avoid the pain of loss, we also avoid the depth of connection. Deep down, we want safety, but we're afraid of being tied down. So we live in a permanent conflict between the desire for freedom and the hunger for real bonds. Work, precariousness, and anxiety. Bauman also sees how work has changed. Before, a job was a source of identity and stability. Today, it's unstable and temporary. Jobs come and go. Careers become obsolete overnight. The market's logic demands constant adaptability. You have to be reinventing yourself all the time, or risk being left behind. This economic model creates chronic anxiety, because the feeling of instability never goes away. You never really arrive. You're always just trying not to sink. And this liquid logic spreads into consumption as well. Nothing is made to last. Products, ideas, people, everything feels disposable. Politics in liquid times. Bauman also analyzes contemporary politics. He sees a deep crisis in democratic institutions. Governments seem powerless in the face of global economic forces. Citizens feel more and more disconnected from the decisions that shape their lives. The big ideologies that once organized political debate are hollowed out. Instead of real visions for the future, we get marketing gestures. Instead of participation, we get distrust and apathy. In liquid modernity, politics becomes a show, and chaos grows behind the curtains, fear as the main emotion. In this generalized instability, fear becomes the central feeling of modern life. Fear of losing your job, fear of rejection, fear of being alone, fear of failure, fear of the other. Bauman says we live in zones of diffuse fear, where danger has no clear shape or face, only presence. And where there is fear, there's a growing demand for control, walls, and authoritarian speeches. Fluidity can bring freedom, but it can also fuel a craving for rigid order, for leaders who promise security at any cost. Is there a way out? Bauman doesn't give easy answers. He's not a nihilist, but he refuses simplistic solutions. He doesn't promise a new system or a new perfect order. What he offers is critical awareness. a clear-eyed look at what's changing, an ethical willingness to resist superficiality, and above all, a renewed focus on human bonds. Instead of running from uncertainty, we need to learn to live inside it, to develop the courage to exist in the flow, to build depth in the middle of liquidity. If everything is unstable, then care becomes a political act. Care for relationships, care for language, care for listening, care for presence. For Bauman, the answer isn't to bring back the old solid world, but to create new ways of living together that can handle fluidity. That requires ethics. It requires responsibility. It requires recognizing the other's vulnerability. In liquid modernity, order hasn't disappeared. It's just become unstable. And living in this scenario demands something rare: the courage not to cling to illusions, the courage to be flexible without losing your integrity, to be free without being disposable, to build deep relationships even in transient times. Because in the end, Bauman reminds us, the task of making human life a little more human is never finished. And if you've made it this far, thank you so much. This journey through chaos, in philosophy, art, psychology, and existence, isn't easy, but it is necessary. Because it's in chaos that life moves. It's in chaos that thought breaks free. And it's from chaos that maybe something new can be born inside us. If this content made sense to you, or if it left you with more questions than answers, that's great. That's exactly the point here. Not to hand you ready-made answers, but to spark reflection. So take a second now and subscribe to the channel. It really helps this project grow and reach more people like you. Like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear this today, and tell me in the comments, which of these views on chaos hit you the hardest? Which idea is still echoing inside you? And of course, stick around. There's a lot more coming. More philosophy, more deep thinking, more encounters with the complexity of life. Click on another video and keep walking this path with me.